it right. There's a scene with Poe that was cut from the movie that shows how he got off Jakku, and there's a speeder chase. Well, that's involved in that. Well, I would have liked to have seen that left in, but it's okay that they didn't. It's totally fine that they ended up, we end up finding out when Poe shows up on Takodana during the battle when he shows up, and then we find out afterwards, only later, that when Finn finds him, that how he got off Jakku. We're totally good with that. The movie is paced really, really well, and because of that, it's infinitely watchable. Because it never gets boring. It's the whole, and J.J. Abrams movies are like that. Every scene matters. Every moment in the film matters. I mean, even the quiet moments in the beginning with Rey on Jakku, they're interesting. Her on the sand, doing the sand toboggan, going into her AT-AT, putting on her that rebel X-Wing pilot helmet, even for a brief moment. I mean, all of that is really all really captivating and just interesting to look at. And the one other thing I wanted to mention were a couple of moments in the film that I thought were really cool, and they're just little things that I liked. And they were very consistent. There are some moments when it comes to the spaceship shots that I thought were really cool. There's a moment after Maz Kanata's castle is destroyed, after Kylo Ren takes Rey, puts her on his command shuttle, when BB-8 looks up at the sky and he sees the group of First Order transporters and Kylo Ren's shuttle taking off, and it's this distant shot of all the ships in the sky. JJ uses that shot several times in the movie, and I think it's really cool. You get that shot, you get the shot of the X-Wing fighters descending on the oscillator on Starkiller Base. It starts off with General Hux looking out at the bridge of whatever the building was there on Starkiller, and it's this distant, faraway shot of the X-Wing fighters coming down. And at the very end of the film, after Starkiller Base turns back into a sun, which I don't think a lot of people have realized. Starkiller Base doesn't actually blow up. I mean, the base blows up, but it ends up being replaced by a gigantic sun. The sun that got sucked away, the sun is sitting there afterwards. And so you essentially have the Millennium Falcon and the First Order X-Wings flying away from a sunset, to a certain extent. But that final shot of the starscape, and then you see Snap Wexley, the X-Wing pilot, makes a comment like, I spot him, and everybody's happy because they see the Millennium Falcon. And then they're way off in the distance, and they say, let's jump to hyperspace, or let's go home. And you just see their glowing jets in the starscape, and then they all go, they all zip off into hyperspace. Those shots are so cool and so different and unique. I mean, they're just visually, I like that. There's one other scene, and it's when they're placing the detonators on Starkiller, and Han is placing them, and they're walking around, and they're magnetically placing those explosives on the various parts inside Starkiller Base. Chewie sets one, and then he climbs up a ladder, and his head kind of goes past the camera before he walks away and places another one. It's just a cool little quiet, I want to say quiet, but just a cool moment with Chewie. Just showing him being somewhat agile. It's like, I don't remember seeing him climbing up a ladder that way and sort of moving in that fashion. Those little tiny subtle things that, they put him in there for a reason. They shot him for a reason, and I appreciate their reasoning for shooting him that way, because they're just these little moments that make the overall bigger parts of the film, even better. It's just, everything is just so visually stunning. And when you get into keeping with this theme right now of why the movie is so much fun to watch, the movie, much like Star Wars, is simple. It doesn't get bogged down by a weighty storyline or politics. There's some backstory of the politics that I wish that they would get into a little bit more, but they don't have to. Again, that's just because I'm a fan. In terms of storytelling, it's pretty simple. You have the resistance, which is sort of the outside the New Republic armed forces that are attempting to take care of the First Order and keep them at bay, while the New Republic armed forces aren't getting involved because they haven't really. That's essentially where this works out, and you see this in some of the literature that's been written about the movie. But essentially, they know the First Order's out there, but there's a peace accord, and the peace accord kept the Empire at bay and kind of tied the hands of what was left of the Empire. Right, the Emperor is destroyed, the Empire is falling apart. They go off into hiding, and there's this concordance that was put together that basically said the Empire couldn't go and regain strength. And so in its place, the First Order rises up. But they hadn't really gone and attacked the New Republic yet. So Leia, not content to just let them rise to power, forms this first resistance, or this resistance, if you will. That's funny, I said first resistance. She forms this resistance, which is why it's a very small group, and it's just made up of sort of X-Wing fighters. Not all the different star systems are involved. And, during the movie, the First Order goes and destroys. They're so concerned that they weren't able to get the droid, and therefore the Resistance was getting close to finding Luke Skywalker, and they believe he's going to be a threat to their existence, that they decide, via Hux's suggestion, that they wipe out the New Republic in order to make it easier to get rid of the Resistance so they don't have anybody standing in their way. So again, the movie is it's very simple in the way that they play all of this out. And much like A New Hope, and that, and what I started the podcast off with, it leaves it open to a world of questions that keeps us wondering and interested until we get episode 8. Think about A New Hope. Again, who was Darth Vader? Well, we didn't really know who Darth Vader was. We found out a little bit when we met Obi-Wan, but that wasn't the truth, right? Well, who were the Jedi Knights? We didn't really know. We knew there were the group of people out there, and that, according to Obi-Wan, Luke's father was a Jedi Knight until, Vader betrayed and murdered his father. And we know that wasn't the case. Who were Luke's parents? We didn't know. We knew that Luke was looking for his dad. And it's funny, too, because I remember how much that stuck with me as a little kid. Being close to my dad. I remember thinking to myself, wow, that must be really, really hard for Luke Skywalker to not know who his daddy is. That must really be a bummer. I can understand why he wants to find his dad, but none of us in a million years thought it would have been Darth Vader. And of course, no idea that Luke and Leia were going to be related, and it turns out that Lucas didn't really know they were going to be related until they got farther into the prequel trilogy. So, A New Hope opened up a lot of questions. Well, The Force Awakens does the same thing. Who is Snoke? We still don't know. Everybody is speculating that it could still be Plagueis, Darth Plagueis. And I'm okay with that if it turns out that it is. I'm just looking forward to finding out who he is. Who are the Knights of Ren? We don't really know. Where were they during the Empire and the Jedi? And again, well, who were Finn's parents? Does that even matter? Are we going to get a Finn backstory? Or are we just going to assume that he was taken at a young age, like he said, away from his parents, and he was pushed into the First Order and trained to be a stormtrooper? And then, of course, the ultimate, who are Rey's parents? And so, again, the mirroring of A New Hope and The Force Awakens continues in that it leaves it open for a lot of questions. And I do wonder, if they've even answered those own questions, or if JJ and Lawrence Kasdan even had answers to those questions, or if they basically set the table for Rian Johnson. He wrote the script for Episode 8, and if he was going to go in and decide, who Rey's parents were going to be, I wonder if they even had landed on anything yet. I assume that's what we're going to find out in Episode 8. if they're going to continue, this rhyming and this poetry of the original trilogy in the new trilogy, then I would expect that episode 8 wouldn't be a rehash of The Empire Strikes Back, but I would expect that we're going to get a reveal of who Rey's parents are in episode 8. But I wonder if they left that up to Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson made a suggestion. I think it should be this person or this family, and then they went back to the story group and had to go and get permission. Like I said, I believe that they know now. And if you were asking me, well, do you think that they wrote the script knowing already who Rey's parents are? Yeah, I think they've mapped this whole thing out by now. If they were really going the Lucas route, they would have, like I said, they would have gone the route of leaving it open-ended and handing it off to the next writer and letting him go and fill in the blanks, because that's kind of what happened with Luke and Leia in the original trilogy. Now let's get to sort of the main theme and topic of the podcast today, and that is, well, who is Rey? Okay, a lot of different theories. I have one that I like, and one that I kind of hope comes to fruition. Before I break down sort of the different options that we have, let's talk a little bit about what we have been told. And what we have been told, sort of in public from Kathleen Kennedy, is that the saga movies, The Force Awakens, Episode 8 and 9, are going to be about the Skywalker family. The question that I have with that, the legacy of Luke Skywalker. The question I have with that is, okay, how long are they going to keep that up, and how long are they going to hold to that? Because unless people are having more children, there's only so far that you can go. Now, obviously, we already know there is one Skywalker descendant in Kylo Ren. Okay, so you already have somebody there to carry on the Skywalker legacy. You still have Luke. And Episode 8 is probably going to be Luke's story. So keeping with this idea of Kathleen Kennedy and what she said about the saga movies being about the Skywalkers, you still have Luke Skywalker in there. My point being is that Rey doesn't necessarily have to be a Skywalker for Kathleen Kennedy's comment to be true. I think we all assume that. We assume this is how it's going to go, and certainly it makes it easier if they make her a Skywalker to continue the Skywalker story even into episodes 10, 11, and 12. Because Rey gets older, Rey hooks up with somebody, has another kid, this kind of thing. But eventually they are going to have to introduce new bloodlines. And you can continue to tell these stories in this sort of Skywalker legacy realm of the saga movies being the core of Star Wars, along with the spin-off movies. I don't think, down the line you necessarily have to have a Skywalker in the saga movies to keep them as saga movies. The question is, how quickly do they move away from that? And given the fact that you have Luke Skywalker going to be playing a pivotal role in 8, then you don't necessarily have to have Rey be a Skywalker. Okay, but let's argue that for just a moment. Let's break down the different sort of the different theories that are out there. So you either have Rey being Luke's daughter, okay? You have Rey being the daughter of somebody that we don't know yet, that we never met before. You have Rey potentially, and this is what I'll get into, being a Kenobi. And this is the idea that I like quite a bit. You also have this idea that's been presented by a couple of different people. It's a theory of Rey still being Han and Leia's kid, but perhaps Han didn't know that Leia was pregnant with Rey. So they have Kylo, who's older than Rey. They send Kylo off to the Luke Academy. Han and Leia split, and after they split, Princess Leia realizes that she's pregnant with Rey, but doesn't tell Han. To me, there are too many leaps that need to be made with that one for that one to be true. Just looking at the timeline and the ages of the individual, that seems like a stretch. So I'm going to just rule that one out. in my opinion. I think there's too many. There were too many circumstances of those characters all meeting each other in The Force Awakens to have to go and